We are back for another episode of Dear Rach and Soph. Who knows what number this is in season 2 because we're recording out of order. Hello, Rachael
We
Johns.
like to mix it up like that and surprise ourselves and everyone else.
How have you been going this week?
Good. I've had a very, very busy week actually. My son graduated in Monday, which felt like last year now. It's so long ago, so long ago. And that was like morning church service at school and then evening stuff. And I've also been finishing marking not essays, short stories for the Best Aussie Yarns. I've done 2 book clubs and a festival, which maybe we'll talk about after I find out about your week.
Well, my week was pretty exciting for me because I handed in the manuscript that's going to be published next year.
Oh,
And
how long do you think till you'll hear back?
well, I know I'll hear back on the 29th of November because they gave
Okay.
me that date for the report to come back. And I think I told you during the week on a text message how my outlook on this process has changed in a good way thanks to you,
Oh, you
because
did.
now instead of sending it in and going, "Ah, whether they're going to like it," I actually thought, no, Rachel loves the rewriting process. I need to have a
Sometimes.
bit about it.
People keep telling me things I love and don't like and things I want and stuff. And then I'm like, did I say that?
You have, in fact, said on this podcast that you love the rewriting process, which is how I found out that
I
you
think I
like.
should be a Gemini and have 2 personalities. Like,
Well,
anyway.
you're perfectly entitled to say you like it some of the time, but I think it was more actually. Let's rephrase it. You prefer it to the initial writing process, was the way you phrased it.
Probably because I'm like, whatever I'm not doing, I prefer. Anyway, don't put it at the time. Anyway,
But
you're excited
regardless,
now. Either way, it's made you feel differently.
it has, because instead of thinking I'm putting something in for a failing mark, which is how I felt in the past, like, oh my God, it's what are they going to say about it? It's not going to work.
Waiting to, yeah.
I'm going to approach this process collaboratively, and I'm going to send in a list of things that I'm concerned about and or would like feedback on. So when I sent in the manuscript, like, here it is. Here's the word count I put it at for these reasons, and then here are some issues that I would really like feedback on, or maybe they're not issues, but here are some points I'd like feedback on. And here are some other things I've done, and I'd really like your thoughts on whether I should have done that or should do
Yep.
this, that sort of thing. So there you go. It was just a whole different attitude. And I think that means when it comes back, because I've asked for the feedback, I'm not going to feel so.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I was just gonna say, like, I'm scared if I like alternate between doing things like that, sending an email and saying, this is what I, think I need to work on, or, because I'm scared that I'm going to put ideas into the editor's head that may not have been there. I'm like, oh, maybe my secondary characters need work. And then maybe that's put an idea into their head. And maybe my secondary characters were fine, but now they're looking for that. So, not to freak you out, but there's that option too.
Oh, well, we'll see. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we're recording on a Sunday, and I've just seen my cousin, and
I can
she
say you just seen your cover. I was very excited there for a moment.
none. I have not seen a cover. I saw my cousin, and she had a copy
Oh,
of
okay.
the other Bridget
Oh, that is so
on her
cool.
kitchen
Oh, well,
bed.
hopefully it's cool. Did she like it? She
She
enjoyed
loves
it?
she's enjoying it. Yes. So there
Oh,
you go.
phew, that's good.
Spontaneous sighting of a Rachel Johns book in the wild.
You probably wouldn't tell me if she said she hated it.
Well, I just wouldn't have told you if she was reading it at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's lovely. I hope she enjoys the rest of it too.
So do I. And
Yeah.
she may in fact be listening to this podcast. So if she is, uh,
Hello, Sophie's cousin.
Kate, her name is. So
Okay.
hope you
Thanks for
did
reading
enjoy
my
it.
book.
And if you didn't enjoy the rest of it, you can take it up with Rachel later. But taking up with Rachel now is the festival that you went to. So tell
Yeah.
me about that.
So yesterday I went to the Festival of Fiction, which is the inaugural Festival of Fiction in Joondalup in Perth. It's the brainchild of my friend Tess Woods, who is absolutely insane. She might listen to this too, and she will know that she'll be nodding her head, because she comes up with these crazy ideas and puts her heart and soul into them. And yeah, she thought she's not busy enough doing a full-time physio job and writing books and launching a book in September, that she would also launch a whole fiction festival. And it went much better than I think she and her team expected. They sold out within the first day. The tickets went on sale. Yep, they had 300, because that was the like how many people could be held in the venue. And so next year they're going from 1 day to 2 days,
Mhm.
and they're going up to 1,200 capacity. So yeah, and it definitely was a success. It was really great. I liked so Tessa's whole idea behind this was to have a festival that focuses on commercial popular fiction rather so much than like a lot of the festivals, especially the big city festivals. And you know, there's a place for everything, but a lot of these festivals focus on what we call, I guess, like literary fiction, books that, you know, have serious, like, well, no, you know what I mean, like, and or poetry or memoir. Actually, it was funny because one lady apparently commented to someone else there, it was good, but next year it'd be great to have a lot more more memoir.
In a
Um,
festival of fiction. Did you?
yeah, exactly. It's fiction, lady. Anyway, but yeah, so I just Tess wanted to be able to have like, popular fiction writers to have the chance to showcase their work and talk about their craft in the way that sort of, yeah, those more literary fiction authors often do, the non-fiction authors often do, and memoirists and things like that. And also for readers of popular fiction to
Mm.
be able to, you know, celebrate it and get there and talk. So we had like, I was on a panel called Love Actually, which I was with Marlena Marquetta, Annie de, oh my gosh, should have had it bought her book here. She wrote a book called Audrey's Gone AWOL. It's her first book, and it sounds like a lot of fun. Annie de Monchaux, I think you say that. And the other person on my panel was Tess herself, and we talked about just writing romance into novels, whether it's a romance, full-on romance novel, or, you know, a love story, and why we like doing that and why we think it's important, and just a whole load of fun. We were interviewed by agent and YA author Danielle Binks, and she was a great interviewer. And then I listened to the next panel, which was I think called Gritty something, and it was crime writing. So it was Anna Downs and Dervla McTiernan and Michael Trent and another WA author. And then yeah, there was just heaps more panels. So we had like fantasy one, children's lit, there was historical fiction, which was fascinating, hearing about all their inspiration and research. So yeah, it was a really, really good day. And then it finished with some publishers and agents talking about, you know, what they think is going on in publishing at the moment. And the first question that they were asked was, what's one word you would use at the moment? So I'm going to ask you this. This is a spur of the moment thing. I'll explain it, but then I'm going to ask you, because you also work in publishing as well as writing. And I mean, so the first question was, what is one word you would use to describe the state of publishing in Australia at the moment, and why? And I really liked, one of them was extreme, in
Mhm.
that, you know, we're seeing some books sell in absolute crazy numbers that are almost never been seen kind of before, yet then a lot of the other books are selling, you know, not really that well at all. And that wasn't, the same publisher didn't have it, had a different word to another one who was talking about, yeah, TikTok basically, all those books and stuff that are coming in from America are taking up shelf space, sadly, for a lot of Australian voices and things like that. So yeah, what's a word that you would describe the Australian publishing industry right now? Can you think of one?
Flux.
Flux. I love that word. And why?
We are in the period of greatest change that I think any of us can
Okay.
recall, and some of it is pandemic induced and pandemic
Mhm.
hangover. And that's to do with reader behavior changing during the pandemic, very much going towards works of imagination rather than works of reality. And book
Yep.
talk kicked off at that time, and not coincidentally, I would imagine.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's continued, and we're also seeing on the nonfiction side a shift towards audiobook as a format, and that means that there are people coming to nonfiction audiobooks who might never have read a book. The
Mm.
difficulty there for the industry is we've never actually attempted to communicate with those people,
Interesting.
and I include people who have print disabilities in that, because we've
Yep.
never published for them. I've said this to my colleagues: we have never considered publishing for people with print disabilities, and we should now, because we have the means to reach them far
Yep.
more easily than we ever have before. And stories are for everyone, information is
Yeah.
for everyone. So we need to really consider that. But of course, having excluded them for so long, how do we connect with them and let them know that there are things there for them? So
Yep.
that shift on the nonfiction side is unlike anything we've ever seen before, and it's happening at a pace that a legacy industry, as some might call publishing, is grappling with, and with difficulty, because our systems are not necessarily set up to understand this. Fiction is definitely in flux, simply because no one's ever seen booksellers so keen to stock romance and fantasy as they are now.
Yeah.
And that means that publishers are also trying to keep on top of this and find out who's doing what and who they should publish. And yes,
Yep.
the authors from the Northern Hemisphere are taking up shelf space, because what that means is they're taking up budget. So
Yeah.
authors have a limited budget each month, and they want to buy what people want to buy from them.
Mm.
And it therefore makes sense, if the demand in a capitalist economy, if the demand is for the book talk books, then the supply is also for the book talk books. And the
Yep.
challenge for Australian authors in that has been that once a trend is identified, it's kind of over.
Yeah.
You're jumping on a particular book talk trend. By the time you've written that book and tried to find a publisher, 2 years might have elapsed, and then
Yep.
it happened.
And I think one thing, I know I heard one publisher say this, I think it was in an article in Books and Publishing, is, and you might disagree with this or have thoughts on this too, but I did hear that someone said, and I think from what I can see it's true, but I haven't been on TikTok much lately, that no Australian publisher yet has managed to have like a breakout TikTok book, you know.
And that's because the majority of users of TikTok in the English language are American. And not because Australians aren't writing books that might be TikTok worthy.
Exactly. It's just a matter of, again, finding those people, isn't it?
It's getting into the hands of the book talkers, and they're mostly American.
Yeah.
And that's how cultural imperialism works. And that's partly why I push back against it on the country music side of things, for example, because we're seeing it in music a lot. And it's really challenging on the music side for Australia.
Another interesting thing related to that, I guess, the publishers talked about in the panel, there was a little bit of a argy-bargy between the publishers and agents in terms of you know, not Britney Spears, the Taylor Swift book, which I'm sure you've heard about. Have you, this last week? So Taylor Swift is putting out a book to coincide with the end of her era.
That one that she's selling. Sorry, I thought you meant a book about her. The one going to Target.
Yeah. And so, you know, someone on the panel was saying how you know, she's there to make money. She's not there for the greater good of the publishing industry, which, you know, she doesn't have to be, whatever. And that the publishers kind of are probably, you know, gnashing their teeth or whatever, because getting a book like Taylor Swift's book would basically pay for, it's like getting Prince Harry's book, or you know, the president's or something like that's book. It pays basically for a lot of other publishing, right? That happens.
Probably questionable about Prince Harry's book in that respect, because I'm not sure he's earned out his advance. But anyway, go on.
Interesting. But yeah, you know, those kind of books often pay for other works of fiction and non-fiction to be published, right? The big books.
Yeah, that's partly how it can work. Yeah.
And saying, obviously, Taylor Swift has gone straight to Target in America instead. Who knows what's going to happen if she'll find a similar deal or something with someone here. And that means, like, one of the publishers or agents was saying that, you know, we need to support local bookshops and stuff. And that's, you know, in doing that, Taylor Swift is taking a lot of possible income, like that would have really helped small bookstores and independent bookstores and stuff like that. And then another publisher, and I'm not naming names, I mean, it doesn't really matter because everyone, you know, there could see it's not private, but another publisher just sort of said, I want to speak up for the DDS stores, which we for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, that's a discount department stores like Big W, Kmart and Target. And she's like, because I might not have a job if we didn't sell books at those volumes in this. And for me personally, and I'm guessing you as well, the majority of my books are sold in the discount department stores. So it's very easy for people to write them off and stuff. But, you know, she was just saying they do support Australian authors, a lot of them.
They absolutely do. And they are in parts of Australia where there are no bookshops, and they're the newsagents stocking books. So in rural and regional Australia, big Kmart, Target, because there used to be Target country, they're now Kmart. So that is how people are finding books, and it was ever thus. It's not like independent bookshops have always had the monopoly on book sales.
No.
And because they are independent and they can make their own decisions about what they buy from publishers and what they sell to customers, it's arguable that some of them would not have stocked that Taylor Swift book because
Yeah.
they like her music. And as far as Taylor going straight to Target, well, she went straight to Disney Plus with the Long Pond sessions.
Yeah.
That's for her as a businesswoman.
She's doing what works. Yeah.
It's also the reduction of decision making for her. I would imagine that one outlet for what she's doing simplifies her life a lot. And as I'm very fond of saying, it's called show business, not show friends.
Yeah.
It doesn't owe anyone anything in terms of supporting any business necessarily. She will do what is good for her, and there's which we have to realize that what's good for her is for the good of all, because of what she's doing, generally speaking, in the culture. That's a bigger discussion about Taylor Swift. But anyway.
Yeah. There was some really interesting sort of panels and discussions that happened, and I had some interesting talks with some authors, which I'll maybe mention in a second, even though we haven't got onto our topic yet. But hopefully this is interesting for people hearing about the festival. But what I should say, during the crime panel, the interviewer asked something about, I can't remember exactly, but it was like, what responsibility do you think like crime authors have to, you know, promote good over evil kind of thing, and to put messages in their books, because of the fact that, you know, a lot of crime, there's victims that, you know, that are living this experience, and that they have actually had this trauma and stuff, and then crime as an entertainment is kind of you know, it's for all of us to enjoy what other people have actually really suffered, because most crime fiction is sort of inspired by a true story or different things like that. So that was a really interesting discussion as well.
But also I argue that for victims of certain types of crimes,
reading about it
can be really, really reassuring to see that crime in print.
That's really, I mean, there was no like right or wrong answer, of course, in this. It was just really interesting to see how the authors, and I won't speak for them, as I said, because I would be paraphrasing and not necessarily remembering likely, but how that they did think about these sort of situations, and how each of them tried to not assume some guilt almost, but some of them did have a little bit of guilt about this, but how they sort of made sure that they were doing good in their fiction, you know. So it was really
interesting. The point I made, I'm speaking from personal experience here. I'm not details, but it's, if crime writers don't include certain types of crimes in their stories, that means you're acting like they never existed. And if you're who is a survivor of a particular crime, and that crime never appears in a story, it's as if the entire world has decided you never exist.
That's true. And there were definitely like references to stuff like that on there as well that we need, especially things like, I guess, domestic and sexual violence, that, you know, we need to talk about them to hopefully show how bad they are. Anyway,
and also perhaps show that there are ways around it. And there's that whole thing I read a while ago about how women are the biggest watchers of crime TV shows, and I think it's partly because they are gathering information to help them avoid those circumstances or get out of them if they find themselves in them.
No. Anyway, I found that just really interesting. And the other chats I kind of had, I think the thing I like about going to festivals, and we've talked before that we don't get invited to billions, so this was nice to have one where it was commercial fiction writers and we did get a chance, is just, as well as, you know, seeing the excited readers and their enthusiasm, and just being able to have these discussions in front of an audience and stuff, but it's the green room and the sort of the pre and post drinks and things like that, where you're connecting with authors that you may have met before or may have met online, but haven't or may not have met before. I know I met Anna Downs, lovely crime writer, and Jacqueline Harvey, picture book author, or not just picture books, middle grade and all that kind of stuff, and another lovely author who lives near me who writes sort of fantasy, Tamara Moss, and so it was really great, and we had some great discussions about agents with a couple of those, because I know you and I talked about agents with Renee Black way back in our first season, and we went into a lot of detail, I think, with questions that Renee had. But back then I hadn't announced it yet, but I was considering That's the right word, parting ways with my agent of 10 or so years, over 10 years. And now I have. So yeah, it was just interesting to hear who each author's agented by, what their thoughts are on the author-agent relationship, what they get out of it, and yeah, so that was some really interesting discussions that I had.
Yeah, so and as I think I might have said in that episode with Renee, if every published author in Australia wanted an agent, they couldn't have one. There simply aren't enough
Mm,
agents. This is a small market. It will always be the case
yeah.
that there aren't enough agents for even the published authors, and therefore for unpublished authors can be even more competitive. But there are other avenues to get to publishers, and probably more
Oh,
avenues than
definitely. We're lucky that in Australia, aren't we? And
yeah.
actually, there was a touch because I was obviously some of the people have US agents. A couple of published authors I talked to have an agent in Australia and an agent either in the UK or the US.
Mhm.
Um, and then Danielle Binks mentioned on stage that her primary focus as an Australian agent is the Australian publishing industry. It's not that she won't help or try and get other opportunities overseas for her pub authors, but if she's taking you on, she's
Yeah.
wanting you to know about the Australian industry. She's wanting you to be passionate about the Australian industry and sort of read other Australian fiction and be
Yeah.
prepared to sort of champion the Australian, and that's the primary home. So again, there's those, for me, one of the reasons that I parted ways with my agent is because she was an American agent, and we hadn't managed to conquer the US or the UK in our 12 year, I think it was actually 12 years together. I had a couple of books out in the US, but nothing there for various circumstances. They didn't do well for various reasons because of various circumstances, and it's very hard to sort of get another chance. So for
Mhm.
me, my focus is the same as Danielle. Like, I love writing my Australian stories. I love reading widely world stories and Australian stories, but my readers, I really think they enjoy reading Australian stories. And to me, if I can grow in Australia, and have longevity here, then that's my main career
Mhm.
goal. And that takes, so then I'm like, yeah, thinking, do I need another agent? Because in Australia, as you said, it's a lot smaller, the industry, in terms of, I do know a lot of now through various, years of being conferences and festivals and just talking to people online. I know a lot of the publishers in Australia.
Mhm.
Probably I know more publishers in Australia than I know agents. um, and I do also have more of an idea about contracts because I have had a number of them now. Whereas I think, having someone in my corner in the early years was good. But now, yeah, I'm at that stage. So I was asking everyone, like, who's your agent? And because I'm kind of like, do I need an agent? Do I want an agent? So yeah, there were some interesting conversations there.
Okay. Well, I'll leave you with your pondering of
Thanks.
whether or not you
I might be asking you some questions off air.
I think
And
you're probably contracted for a while now anyway, so you may not need
yeah,
to.
I am. So that's the thing. I'm in no rush because I have done a deal by myself now as well. Anyway, we probably should get on to today's. I
Okay, yeah.
hope everyone enjoyed my ramblings about the festival. And if you can get to anything like that, a commercial fiction festival, I really recommend it.
Well, and what before we leave that subject altogether, I mean, it's amazing that 300 tickets sold out on the first day of sale.
I
I'm
know.
wondering whether you think it means that readers in the Perth area are just really hungry for events. And so when that came up, they were like, oh, great, this is actually a really efficient way to get a lot of literary events in one.
Yeah, could be. I do think like the Perth, like usually we get quite good numbers at Perth author events and things like that. And the libraries are very passionate, especially the Shire of Joondalup Libraries, which is where this was held. It could also be that our own Perth Writers Festival has got sadly a lot smaller in the last few years. It's not happening next year, I think, but they're hoping to come back bigger and better again in 2026. This year it was held at the State Library for the first time, and run by Writing WA, and they did a really great job scrambling together, I think, people at a lot shorter notice and without the resources that previously. But yeah, the funding's been cut. And so I think people we want something like that in our state. And
Mhm.
yeah, so who knows? But I think there's definitely it showed there's definitely a desire to have lots of commercial fiction events.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Congratulations to Tess.
Yes, definitely.
All right, so our subject for today, it is a question from lovely Elaine in New Zealand. Now, you and I both met Elaine in person
Yes, I
at
remember.
your readers retreat. She came
Yep.
over from New Zealand for it. She contacts you and me on Instagram, and she's just a delightful person. And she sent in a question, which has been the book you've written that you've most enjoyed writing, and did reader feedback reflect your own feelings? I'm going to let you go first. Because you have them like this is like Elaine. I have to tell you, for Rachel, I think this is a very difficult question because she has so many books. So
I've brought up my website and on the book page, so I can scroll down for memories and stuff. There's two parts, I guess, to that question. And yeah, I just want to say, usually I love listener questions, so please send it in. But this is a hard one, Elaine.
yes,
But that's
yeah.
good because, as we've talked about before, we like a challenge, don't we, Sophie?
We do, yes, yeah.
Okay, so I think the first part of the question was like, which of your books do you like the best? And that's really hard because I think, yeah, I've got up to 30, I think, if we're including the novellas and things like that, 21 as of next week in print in Australia. And so some of them also I've written a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I cannot necessarily remember various things about them. When I went to the book club the other day, and they were doing How to Mend a Broken Heart, which is probably one of my favorite ones because it's set in New Orleans. I got to go on a fabulous research trip. I'd been there before. I love it. It's also got the things I love, other things I love in books, which is a ghostly element. And I have written 4 ghosts in books to various extents, but I'm definitely not a paranormal sort of author, so I think I can only get away with it, Beverly, every 4 or 5 books. But I do, so there was a lot of things I love. I love the place of New Orleans, so being, writing that book was joy because it was like going on a holiday again. I think I also wrote it, I'm trying to remember, I think I wrote it in COVID in the end. I think we did the trip just before the year before COVID. And so when I was actually writing it, I'm pretty sure it was the beginning of, our COVID times. So I couldn't go anywhere, but I could relive our research trip / holiday that I went on with my friend Anthea Hodgson. So I did really love that one. But I was going to say the thing about the book club the other day, they did that one. And one of the things that one of them said, like, they all seemed to really enjoy it, which was good. But a couple of people said they found the first chapter hard, sort of because there were so many characters.
Right.
And I was like, what happened in the first chapter? There was so many characters. Like I could not. And they're like, well, because it was set at a wedding. I was like, oh, okay. Like literally I'd completely forgot how that book started.
I understand.
I'd probably fail, and you probably would too if we were given a quiz on our books. Probably some diehard readers would know more because I've got people, and I'm sure you do too, have said, they've read particular ones of my books that have touched them, 3 or 4 times. That's more than actually, probably when we're editing and stuff, we read it that much, but then we sort of put them aside and move on to the next lot of characters, right? So yeah, I do love that one. So there's the question of what's your favorites. I don't know if I can pick a number one favorite, so I'll be interested to see if you can pick a number one favorite. I can definitely pick ones that I like better, which I'll tell you about in a second. But the second part of that question is, correct if I'm wrong, do our feelings about a book reflect the readers? Was it something?
Yes. Yeah. Did reader feedback reflect your own feelings about that favorite book?
And the interesting thing is, I would say, while I love all my books now, like once they're done, some I have had a lot harder time writing them. Some books, what do they call it? Like fairy dust books that it's very rare. Like it probably happens for me every 5 to 7 novels, where one just seems to, an idea lands in your head that's more fully formed than maybe usual. that you're excited about, that has a perfect title. And we've talked before about how titles really help me, be able to write. And then other books, they're problem children, right? And we do love, well, as a mum, you do love the problem children, but sometimes it's hard. And there's books of mine, I think one particular that I like, there's a couple of books actually. I can choose one. Rural Outback Dreams I struggled with a lot. One of the reasons I struggled with that book was I had a different idea for another book, and I was super excited about that. I think I may have talked on our rejection podcast about this, that I had an idea for a book with a single mum truckie heroine, and
Oh, yeah.
super excited about it, and written up a semi blurb draft or synopsis kind of thing to pitch. And then I was told that they just bought somebody else that had pretty much that exact same kind of story. So could I write something else? And so I then had to put away that idea that I was excited about and really wanted to write and thought was fun. And I had to, this is the first book I had to manufacture an idea. And I don't know if you have, had any books where you feel you've really had to manufacture the idea rather than had like inspiration strike. Have you had anything?
Yeah, well, only manufacture parts of the story, and that the publisher might have had some feedback on the story idea, and so we would go back and forth at that stage.
Yeah.
But as mentioned in the past, I'm a big believer in feeling something's right as opposed to thinking it's right.
100%.
So I would never commit to doing something if I didn't feel it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't commit to do it thinking it was going to, not the right thing to do. And it started a whole new series for me, which was probably one of my most popular books. So it's not that it was but what happened is I was then like, okay, what am I going to write about now? And I had to kind of think, well, what am I interested in? Like, so I was really looking around more, like actually looking for ideas and issue. Like that book is about a barking ball, which is a fundraiser for dogs for autism or therapy type dogs. I taught someone who had one of those dogs, and our local town had done a ball to try and raise funds for that. And I thought the barking ball, I like that idea. So I remembered that and I'm like, what else is gonna, and then I kind of went from there, and I really had to think about it before, so I went looking for an idea, if that makes sense, rather than something dropped in my head. And I think I had a lot of doubt when I was writing that book because of that. And it was a friends to lovers story, which I think, and I know Emily Henry has said this too, friends to lovers is one of the hardest romance tropes to write because they already know each other really well, right? They like each other. The conflict's going to have to come from the maybe sacrificing, risking that friendship. But whereas if you've got enemies to lovers or boss and employee, enemies to lovers, you've got banter and the reason why they hate each other, and you've got to work through all these things. And I did find that friends to lovers was quite a hard one. And actually I just realized, because I was just trying to think, have I written another friends to lovers? And I wouldn't say I have exactly written another friends to lovers. They've all had sort of another trope that's much more strong, and the friendship it didn't go as far back as this one. So these friends in Outback Dreams grew up together, and they were childhood besties, like from as long as they can remember, like they, nappies together and stuff. So there's a lot of shared history there. But I did scrap another friends to lovers. I just realized when I tried to write Outback Secrets, which I've probably talked about before, in that I lost 35,000 words and then another 30,000 words, and then finally settled on another story. The first one was actually a sort of a friends to lovers. It was also the one that got away. Like, he'd always liked her. She married his best friend kind of thing, but they were really good friends. And I couldn't get it to work. And so it is hard. I reckon friends to lovers is really hard to do well. It's very satisfying if it is done well. So I would say Outback Dreams, although it gave me a lot of grief and I didn't love when I was writing it, it is a lot of people's favorite book. When they say to me, what I really, really love Outback Dreams, that's my favorite in the series. Not everyone's favorite, but you know what I mean? It always surprises me when someone says they like it, because I'm like, really? Like, that was you like it? Okay. Like I was hoping, I remember, I don't know if you've ever thought this. My guess is you've never thought this because you're a much more wise, sensible person than me. But
It's totally debatable.
I don't think it is.
But anyway, go on.
So little C, I have thought while writing that book, and I have thought it since, that, you know, as a reader, because we're both readers as well as writers, if I've loved an author, right, and I've read all their books and stuff, if they don't write like if one book I don't particularly like, I'll still go back for the next one probably because you know I always figure if I've got glued on, you know, readers and stuff, you know, you've got one. I was like, I've got one book where, you know, if I don't do it quite as well as the others, then people are still going to give me another chance, right? And that's what I was telling myself way back then. What?
They have a relationship with you as a
Yeah.
writer.
So and the other book that was similar to that actually, and I realized, so you know, you learn a lot about your writing process, and I think as you go, and although you said you'd never write a book that you weren't like excited kind of about, and I think that's really good advice. And I try and do that. You know, I try and find the excitement now. I remind myself always. Actually, Natasha Lester said in the panel yesterday when she was asked, you know, what's your advice for writing, you know, aspiring writers? She was like, be obsessed with your book. Like, make yourself obsessed with it. Remember why, you know, continue, like treat your book like a crush you have, where you can't think, you know, like you absolutely love it. And I think that's really good advice because it means you're excited and it's fun.
Yeah, and it should be fun. I mean, this gets lost, I think, and it gets lost in some of the what I would call manufactured Sturm und Drang around writing, which is that you have to be eking it out of your marrow. You've got to suffer for your eyes. Like, why? If you're suffering for it, why would you do it?
I really don't get that either. Yeah, I mean, it's never fun, as all the panelists said yesterday, and I'm sure you'll agree. It's never fun all the time. It's hard work sometimes.
Quite a lot of it.
Yeah, and also, but your idea and stuff, you have to think's fun, and the characters you have to like, and you're like,
you've got to want to spend time with them, even if they're difficult people, and you're trying to depict that on the page for whatever reason. You have to
be interested in them. Yeah, exactly. And so I realized. So the other book that, and this is a reverse way of answering Elaine's question. The other book that was similar for me was The Art of Keeping Secrets. In that felt really quite manufactured because I'd written The Patterson Girls, and the idea for that just sort of came to me and launched me in writing from rural to also writing in, you know, general contemporary fiction. And then that did well. So I was like, well, I need to do another one in that world, that kind of genre. But I didn't have an idea. So I sort of like manufactured. And I think what I'm realizing is that to me, that can feel not right in my heart. And so it makes me doubt more and question. Not that, I mean, I doubt all the time, but readers don't know that. They don't see it. Like, which is why I've said before, you're never the best judge of your own work.
You are not. No.
There's plenty of people have said to me, The Art of Keeping Secrets is my favorite book. And so it's interesting now, I'm much more fonder of The Art of Keeping Secrets and Outback Dreams than I was years ago. And I have actually, although I don't usually make a point to reread my own work because there's so many other people's books I want to read, right? I've reread Outback Dreams, and I have reread The Art of Keeping Secrets because both of those, like the Outback Dreams is a series, and I came back to the series quite a few years after writing the first three. And so I had to remind myself. And I wrote How to Mend a Broken Heart, which is a follow-on and linked book to The Art of Keeping Secrets. So again, I wrote that a few years after and never planned to write that, which means that then I went back and reread that book to remind myself, you know, who the characters are, what they look like, what they like, all that kind of thing, what had actually happened. And I was pleasantly surprised. You know, I was like, oh, I actually quite like these books. So it's really nice to read your own books later and think, but because when you're writing it, sometimes I do think, yeah, you need that distance from it. So look, my favorite book would probably be, there's a couple of, I'm going to try and answer that question and then pass it over to you. My favorite books are probably, and it's so hard, but I was scrolling down here and I was going to say my favorite books are probably the ones that launched me in each different. So Jilted was, I did have a digital novella before that, but it wasn't that book wasn't a passion kind of project. It was me trying to, one of my Meals and Boon rejects I've been trying for years and years. Jilted was my last ditch attempt. I'm going to remind myself to have fun. I'm going to write about stuff that I really enjoy, which is a rural small town community and acting and, theatre and stuff like that. And it kickstarted my career. Like the other book did not kickstart my career. It was Jilted that did. So of course, and you always love your first, right? You always remember your first love. So Jilted is very special to me, but then, there's been other books. Outback Ghost has got a mystery at its heart, which I really enjoyed writing. Outback Sisters is a whole load of fun because there's 2 couples in there, and that was interesting. So there's so many books that I like different things about them. But yeah, I'm more fond of the ones that didn't take a lot of hard work. Patterson Girls, well, it launched me in a whole different direction again, and it was fun writing about 4 sisters when I'm only an only child. And also it did win the general fiction book of the year in Australia, which was, definitely a career highlight. So that's always going to be special to me. But there's some other of my women's fiction that, I mentioned How to Mend a Broken Heart before, because that was set in New Orleans. The Work Wives came after my period of really struggling to write. And I was like, I am going to have fun, the whole thing again. I'm going to, fall in love with these characters, the concept, and there's crazy things in there that I'm interested in at the moment, earrings, roller skates, budgerigars. I'm just going to have fun. And so that's special to me as well. And of course, not the Bad Bridesmaid, the other Bridget, that it was the start of another sort of like a rom-com, a sort of a different type of writing. New publisher, so it was very exciting. But that book too kind of was one of those books that just there were hard times writing it, but from the moment I came up with that idea, I was in love with that idea. And it's a celebration of so many things I love, which is books and libraries and the communities formed, with these things. So, and Bridget Jones. So yeah, I'm sorry, Elaine. It's a really hard question to answer. I think the bottom line is I do love all my books in different ways. I may not have loved all of them all the time. Anyway, over to you, Sophie.
And also, I think, Elaine's second part of that question, did reader feedback reflect your own feelings? It seems that actually reader feedback changed your feelings about.
Yeah, maybe. Or it definitely doesn't reflect my feelings immediately, I would say. So, yeah. And sometimes also sales, I would say, I know Elaine wasn't necessarily asking that, but and we've hopefully got listeners who are readers and writers, and the readers might be interested in that question, but I'm going to add an extra bit onto that question for the writers, in that the books that I love the most, the books that are probably best reviewed and rated, and if you look on, Goodreads or are not necessarily the ones that have sold the best.
Yeah.
So, I think that's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. So I was actually asked this question at an event I did yesterday. So we're talking Sunday afternoon.
Already been warmed up.
I was at East Maitland Library and I had a wonderful event there, and just so many lovely readers who came and spoke to me afterwards. So thank you, if anyone's listening, for being there. So I was asked if I had a favorite, and I do not. And that's because once they're done, I move on to the next one. Actually, the answer I gave was, my favorite is whatever I'm writing at the moment.
Yeah, and I've heard so many people say that's similar.
So I've just handed in a manuscript because it goes back to that whole thing about being obsessed with what you do. I'm not necessarily obsessed with the novel and the characters, but I'm certainly in there with them. Yeah. And because this novel is now in for editing, and I know it's coming back to me, I'm staying in that world with them. They are definitely living in my brain. Yeah. I am on the central coast of New South Wales with these characters. I'm thinking about them. I daydream about where they work, where they live, like all that sort of stuff. I'm still doing it because they're coming back to me. Mm-hmm. And that means that Art Out at the Duchess Hotel, I'm talking about at events, and that's not my most favorite at the moment because I'm focused on this new one. And so I really think in turn they've all been favorites, and I love all but I know I have to let them go and be out in the world because that's their job. That's what they need to do. So
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's true. You've got to, in some ways, probably when you let them go, it's not a bad idea, because then you start getting reviews and stuff. And if you're too in love with them and you get a bad review, it might like.
I don't actually read reviews, and we are going to talk about reviews. At a later
We
date.
are.
Yeah.
I can't wait for
I'd
that
say
podcast.
Shelly Bay Lady Swimming Circle is possibly, it's not closest to my heart, but it's the only time I've written about my own experiences with one thing in a very
Yep.
detailed way. And I think I've mentioned this before, that, and if anyone's not read the novel and wants to, then don't listen to this because I'll be giving a spoiler.
Yeah, okay, that you've been warned, people.
But so there's a character called Teresa in it, and she's the first character we meet, and she has an illness and she's in hospital. With the last chapter we have with her, that's not to say she dies, but the last chapter we have in her point of view and what she goes through in that hospital, sickness wise, is what happened to me in 2011. And so that was the time when I really had to go into my own experiences again. But when I say that, I live that experience all the time.
Yeah.
The time I wrote that, I was still living it on an almost daily basis. It's a lot better now, but that's what happens when you go through something very traumatic. And I did almost die, and I had certain things happen as I was making certain decisions, and it became a decision about whether I lived or died. So there were certain moments, and I, without going into too much detail about it, when the only thing that was going to keep me alive was if I decided to stay alive, because the medical things that were going on were the most that could be done. And I know from other experiences talking to people in the medical field as well, is that often the difference between living and dying is the decision someone makes, how strong their will to live is. So there were things that I had to go through that that meant that I'm still here. Obviously, I had to go back into those, and I wanted to, partly because I thought I may never get another chance. I didn't know if I would be writing another book after Shelly Bay. It was going to be the second novel. Second novels often don't work after the first novel because there's a lot of promotion and publicity.
Oh, you just made me think of another topic for our podcast. We should try and get some second novel syndrome.
Second novel syndrome, which is like second album syndrome, which
anyway, keep going. Sorry.
That's all right. But I didn't know if there'd be another opportunity. I didn't know if I'd be able to write about it. And I thought, this is it. This is my one chance to document this experience, because it was so vivid for me, and it had been so important and life-changing. Because when you are in a situation where you know you may die, and your body is in fact about to give up, and you know that the only thing separating you from living and dying is how much energy literally you can put into staying alive, it does stay with you, and it does transform forever. So that's what I decided to document. And so that novel therefore has that chapter in it.
That's such a big part of you in it.
And so I suppose that's the one, therefore it's closest to me in that respect. And I've consciously made that decision to put my own life in it. And also there is a character in there who's adopted, so we've done an episode about adoption. So I think, when I look back at Shelly Bay, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get that chance. So Fairvale had come out and had done really well. That's the inaugural meeting of the Fairvale Ladies Book Club. I shortened it to Fairvale.
It's a long title.
It is, but Shelly Bay, I thought might be the last one. So I just thought, right, well, I'm going to put in some things that are close to me and important to me to document. But the character who's adopted in Shelly Bay, it's like the experiences are extremely different. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Oh, yeah, I'm just writing something down because you've made me think of something. But yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder though, because what I was wondering, because I was thinking, obviously you've said this is a personal something that's happened to you that's in the book, but also like a lot of your books, like obviously you like books, I guess. So Fairvale is about books. I'm pretty sure you like swimming because I've seen you, do whenever you go places, I see you do your beach shots. And
and actually, sorry, as you're talking, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just realized I talked about a character being adopted in Shelly Bay. I'm incorrect. It was a character who gave up a baby for adoption.
Okay. Yes. Don't worry.
That's an example of how you can forget details about the story.
Because I was wondering, so obviously, the second book is quite, personal in certain ways. Thursdays at Orange Blossom House, I was wondering, because I sort of think of you being yoga. For anyone who hasn't listened or has listened for a while, you would have heard Sophie talk about how she's also a yoga teacher and loves doing yoga and has a lot of experience with that. And Thursdays at Orange Blossom's House is about yoga, right?
Yeah.
So, but I guess so. Like, I just what I'm saying, looking at all your books, I'm saying is, the thread to me through all your books, apart from that, a lot of them have a thing that the characters, do or join to come together. We're talking about that whole fun and passion and stuff. You've chosen topics in each of the books that you either, it seems to me, that you really enjoy. You've done music as well, or maybe that you want to get into more, like.
Yeah, so the yoga was not my idea. That was a
Oh,
suggestion.
really? Interesting.
They suggested that I write about yoga. I was actually initially reluctant because I just thought, how do I document this in a way that does not seem really naff?
Yep.
And is true to my experience as a student as well as a teacher. And it did take a bit of consideration to get it right because, well, hopefully I got it right. But, then at this event yesterday, I met someone who told me that book completely changed her life.
Exactly. Isn't that?
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, that's a whole other episode probably in terms of like those sort of stories.
Which really is always wild and amazing to me. But yeah, certainly Bellbird River Country Choir. Yeah, that was something that I went to the publisher with, and I wanted to write about music, and I wanted to set it near Tamworth, and I chose a choir rather than a band because the choir was an easier structure for the story I wanted to tell than a band where you've only got 4 people in it or 5 people.
Yep. No. And something else I just wrote down, because you said that obviously you with the Shelley Bay Ladies Swimming Circle, you were like, maybe this is the last book that I'm going to be writing or whatever, which made me think of something that I've heard people say before, and that is, don't like hold your best idea, or don't hold certain stuff you want to, write about for a different book, and I thought you said like something that made me think, do you reckon you should write every book like it's the last book you'll ever write?
Absolutely, because it may be, you just don't know. It's like, and look, I've got to say also, this is related to me being sick in 2011 when I went into emergency, and when I went off to surgery. So the part that's detailed in Shelley Bay is actually what came after that. But when I went off to surgery, knowing there was a good chance I wasn't going to make it, I remember thinking, well, all my business is done. I've tied up everything. Everyone I love knows I love them. And I lived that way for a while, thanks largely to my yoga practice and that mindset. But I think it's a similar thing with any creative project. Your business should always be tied up with that novel, or with that song or album or whatever it is, because you don't know if you'll get another opportunity. None of us does. None of us knows if we'll be here tomorrow. And I don't see that as a bleak thing at all. I think that's actually an exhortation to live now.
Yeah, freeing thing.
You really don't know. So throw everything at it, because it might be your last chance. And if it's not, well, great. You can come up with something else.
Find something else, because ideas are like everywhere. One of the questions as well, like one of the questions that I was asked yesterday on the panel was, because I have written a number of books in, similar genres, do I ever get scared of, not like, how many stories are there? How do I keep them fresh? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And I actually quoted something that I saw on Catherine Center's, I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a wonderful US author of romantic contemporary fiction. And she's really worth following on Instagram if you're not already, peoples, because she has lots of wisdom like you, Sophie, in her posts about writing and genre fiction and things like that. And one of the things she said the other day was, people often say that romance fiction is formulaic and predictable. And she's like, the structure should be predictable. This is literally, it's all the minor things you do that make your story fresh and original. And I said similarly, like, there is every person in the world has had some kind of love story, right? Most people have had multiple, relationships. So there's that many story ideas and more, like there's that many ways of, so yeah, again, I'm going off on a tangent, but this is a really interesting thing to think about. So thanks, Elaine.
You're allowed to go on a tangent, Rachel, because it's your podcast.
Our podcast.
Well, true, but you're in it. Your name's on it. You do whatever you like.
So have you anything else to add in terms of your favourite books,
I love
and what the readers think, because that was
what the readers think. Well, I think because look, I am constantly amazed that anyone reads the books, let alone has anything to tell.
Yeah, I know.
And then people have sent me messages telling me how some of the details in the stories have matched their own lives and down to names. And I had some of that yesterday at the
Wow.
cinema, where people were like, well, I'm this name and my mother-in-law is that same as that character. So, you know, it was basically, this was
Yeah.
Sunshine Gardening Society they were talking about. And
Yeah.
so those details, and I remember after Shelley Bay, there was a woman who wrote to me saying, you don't know me, but you know me. And she
Wow,
listed all these details that were in the story that matched her life. She's like,
wow.
you know me. And I think that ties into what I always feel writing, which is, and I also do it teaching yoga, which is, I think I might have mentioned this in the past as well, but sometimes when I'm teaching a class, I always change what I plan because I deal with who's in the room and I want to have the class reflect what they need at that moment. But often something will just pop into my head and I'll think,
You like writing?
someone here needs this. So I'm just going to work it into the sequence, and that requires some creativity because you have to do it mindfully and then counterpose and all those sorts of things. And yes, the same thing happens writing. Someone needs it. There'll be things that pop up and I think, all right, this has popped up here because someone needs it. I don't know who it is.
Wow, I love
Maybe
that.
one person, but I'm just going to put it in. I'm going to trust what these characters are telling me because what I'm doing is telling a story, and this is an exchange between me and the person who's on the other side of the story.
Yep.
And it's not for me to decide that it shouldn't be in there if this has come to me. Now that sort of response does require some experience. I don't think it's something that you do when you're writing your first manuscript. It also, for me, requires having the background teaching yoga in particular, which doesn't mean you have to be a yoga teacher to have it. It's
You.
yeah, well, it just means, trust the process that you've been through, and you've been through several times now, Rachel, writing books, is that you start to trust that flow.
Yep.
It's like, well, this is a continuum. It will continue. So that's the thing about, to go back to should you hold back on things? No, because this is a creative continuum.
Yeah.
The river will keep flowing and you can step into it and step out of it when you need to borrow from something I said last season. So you just get to a point when you've been doing it for a while where you think, well, the river is flowing and I'm just going with it.
And it's true. Like, I think that's why I've got Trust the Magic on here as well. It's for each book as I'm struggling, but also, I often used to find I get an idea halfway through a book for the next book. And that's daunting, but also exciting because it's like, oh, I really want to write that book because that one seems so much more exciting than what I'm currently writing. But then it means that I always feel, oh, well, I've got another idea. There's another book in me. And that actually stopped for a while when I let myself get creatively burned out and forgot to enjoy the process and have fun with what I do and that. So yeah, if you do like live in this world, have fun with it, don't put too much pressure on yourself, then definitely ideas will keep coming. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not an infinite resource, but it's a pretty vast one.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting.
The universe is pretty vast, and the ideas are just floating out there, as Elizabeth Gilbert would tell us. They're just floating around out there, and there are many, many of them. And the way you interpret them as the writer or whichever art form you're engaged in is yours alone. So there might be an idea that you have in common with someone else in terms of a broad story, but the way you're going to put that down is yours.
Yeah. That's an interesting discussion. Thanks,
Elaine.
And if anyone else has any questions, reading related, book related, or writing or publishing related, please email them to us. And I should say, Sophie, that yesterday I talked to 2 or 3 people, and I'm sure you probably did it, who came up to me and said they really loved the podcast. So,
yes, I did. Actually, I met some people who listened and people who love your writing, and I gave them an opportunity to talk about you to me, which I thought was great. I'm happy to take what's on your.
We should probably ask again that please, if you do like it, can you just take 5 seconds, 5 minutes to rate us where you listen to your pod, and if you've even got a few more minutes, leave us a review.
Yeah, I think if it's YouTube, we're meant to say like and subscribe, which is on
like and subscribe. Okay, yes, like and subscribe.
So I will ask you this time, Rachel, what are you reading?
Oh, you must have read my mind. I have just started again. Slow Dance by Rachael. I think you've read it. Did you say you've?
I haven't, no, but I do love her work.
So I started it before I saw you in Sydney, And then for some reason, like I was really enjoying it, but for some reason, I don't know whether I had to do something else or, I'm very much unfaithful when it comes to reading. Like I jump from book to book and, go back to them at some stage, but I hadn't got back to this one yet. And then yesterday, a few other great discussions that I had were with Danielle Binks and who's an agent and children's author, as mentioned before, and Kajal, I can't remember her surname, who is a head of marketing and publicity or something like that at Pantera Press, and who I've known for a few years in publishing. And we were just talking about our favourite romance books. And then they both said, well, Kajal said that she'd read Slow Dance on the plane from Sydney to Perth. And she said she just devoured it and, stayed up until 3 a.m. when she got there to read it because she just couldn't stop. And Danielle then was raving about it too. And I was like, well, I have got it. So they said you must raise it to the top of your pile. Now I've only started again. I gave myself like half an hour of reading time this morning before I did some writing. So I'm not very far in, but it's a second chance kind of friends to lovers romance. So and I'm really looking forward to it. How about you?
I am doing 2 Rachel treasures at once. I am reading the print book of Milking Time, which is Rachel Treasure's latest novel. Now, I met Rachel at your readers retreat on the Gold Coast and just fell in love with her. She is the most delightful human person and funny and just so much depth and warmth and heart. And it's taken me a while to get to Milking Time just because
I actually still need to read Milking Time, even though it was one of the book club books. I didn't get to it because Anthea read hers.
Well, and also, so the other what I'm listening to is her memoir, Down the Dirt Roads, because I thought I'd be interested to get some background, because the way she talked about Milking Time at the Readers Retreat was that it was in part an expression of her ideas around agriculture and her experience as someone who works the land. So I kind of enjoyed that context. So it's actually working quite well because then I can just have the memoir going when I'm doing various.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like if you're reading 2 of her fiction books at once, it may have been a little bit hard. Have you read Wild Horses? I think it's Wild Horses. I'm just checking the
No, I have not.
That is those White Horses. I'm just checking that. I mean, I love Rachel Treasure's stuff.
And we will be in fact talking to Rachel Treasure.
Yeah, I have since Jillaroo, and obviously I have a lot to thank for Rachel because she basically opened Australian publishing up to rural romance, but with Jillaroo. Also, I think a lot of the reason my success, we joke about this because my name is Rachel, hers is Rachel too, and people seem to just see a name, and like so many people have said to me, "Oh, I love Jillaroo," and then she's had people say to her that they love Jilted or other, and we're both like, I like it too, but didn't write it. I always joke, I think like people just saw the name Rachel and it was a rural romance in the early days, so they just bought my book, so it really helped me. So thanks. But yeah, White Horses was her one before Milking Time. And it's one of my favorite books. I'd like to reread that one actually. I love it.
She's a lovely writer, and hopefully people will listen to our episode with her, which we haven't recorded yet, but
coming up soon
because she's just great. So 2 Rachel treasures at once for me.
Well, you can't get enough. It's never too much Rachel.
Well, look, I agree with that. Too much Rachel is barely enough, to paraphrase Roy and HG. So I think we might leave it there. That's a really good note.
Sounds good. Thanks for another fabulous chat.
Thank you. And I will be talking to you soon.